We are back. Dynasty Decisions, episode 91. We take your rebuilding questions, your contending questions, your trade questions. We look at your dynasty teams and determine your best courses of action going forward. You guys know the drill if you are subscribers of this channel. If you're not, of course, leave a like, hit the subscribe button. If you want us to break down your team, you can submit it down below in the description. There's a Google form there. Site members, flockers, and mother flockers skip the line. Free submissions get added to the queue. We're covering, I think, four mother flocker and flocker submissions today, and then 4 free submissions today. So before we get into it, Danny, what's up? How you doing?
Doing well. And yeah, before we waste any time, let's get right into the first submission. But before we do that, you guys know what has to be done.
All right, so let's start with Nick Tano's team. He is a Mother Flocker tier member, ergo he gets to skip the line. He has his team listed here, 12-team PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown. No premiums by the looks of it, but it is a super flex format. Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Trey Lance, Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield, a couple other guys there at quarterback. Pretty barren at running back with like Rashad Penny and CEH and a bunch of other guys there. Drake London, DJ Moore, Jahan Dotson, Darnell Mooney, Nico Collins, Jameson Williams, and a couple other guys at wide receiver. And then not much to speak of at tight end, but he does have some draft picks listed here. It looks like he has the 103 in this upcoming rookie draft. Hasn't had his draft by the looks of it. Has the 202, 203, 210, etc. And then has a bunch of extra second and third round picks next year, and also an additional first in 2025. So his breakdown kind of his league market, he said pretty much there's some guys at the top of this league who went a win now mentality in the startup last year. So this league is only now 2 years old. He said he thought about going for a productive struggle next year, knew about getting, 2 top quarterbacks and a super flex is important. Obviously having Herbert and Lamar to lock down that position. He said now trying to think about what I should try to get for the 103 since he's very set at quarterback. He said he also has some people interested in Jameson Williams. What would his price be? And then any other suggestions to explore in this league. And then we'll break down some of his trades. So what are your thoughts on his questions here?
Well, the question I have is, you mentioned people are interested in JMO. I would maybe try to see if the overall sum of its parts in some type of way, JMO in the 103 can get you 3 future first of equity. And I don't know how you're going to be able to do it. Maybe you add like a second, or maybe you add like a Darnell Mooney type to be able to do it. But if you can leave off of those 2 assets, the 103 and Jameson Williams, with 3 future banked 2024, maybe even if one of them's a 2025 one, I think that's going to be the best position you want to be in, because obviously you built up the wide receiver depth. You have the stud quarterbacks here. Realistically, by next year, that's when you're going to want some buying power, and being able to liquidate those assets right now with the 103 with Jameson Williams is going to set you up beautifully in the long term, like I said, to be able to buy a running back to when you need to be able to maybe see how your wide receivers progress. Maybe Drake London by this time next year is a consensus top 6 overall dynasty wide receiver. DJ Moore blossoms with Justin Fields, and then Jahan Dotson has a great second year. And now okay, like I have really, really good depth at the wide receiver position. Maybe you want one more anchor at that point. And as great as Jameson Williams may be this year, his ceiling is capped from a market's perspective, in my opinion, because he is missing 6 games. He is still losing targets, obviously, to Amon St. Brown on that offense. Realistically, the highest type of outlook you could possibly be looking at for him, if you were to keep him, would be like a wide receiver 15, wide receiver 17 type, maybe similar to what Jerry Jeudy was this year, projecting forward. So again, if you can liquidate those assets, you're going to be in a very, very prime spot to make this thing a monster.
Yeah, when I'm rebuilding, I don't love having risky assets, and I see a couple on this team. Jameson Williams, like we just mentioned, Trey Lance, also kind of a risky asset. I get it. You have Herbert and Lamar, so Lance is a good upside swing. But for me, we've gone back and forth on this a million times. I'm lower on Lance. I think I would rather offload him now before his, value starts to tank or whatever, especially if we get some good training camp reports or something like that. I would use that as a way maybe to move off of the 103. You could maybe package Trey Lance and the 103 to a quarterback needy team, maybe for a cornerstone wide receiver, or maybe you could do that, like Danny said, for just a bunch of pick equity or something like that. I personally would be looking to move off of Lance, Jameson Williams, probably even potentially DJ Moore, because he's a little bit up there in age, and I don't know how his situation is going to materialize this year. I would want to re-roll those assets into pick equity if possible.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. Like if DJ Moore, if you can add a tiny piece, you haven't had your rookie draft yet, but hypothetically, if DJ Moore plus the 203 got you to the 107, 108, and you can replace that with Addison, I think that'd be a fine pick. Also, on the Lance point, I do think like if you get any type of first round type of equity, I'd be willing to sell Lance. The problem that I do have with trying to sell Lance on the current market is that it's seldom that you're going to get a first rounder of equity from a Trey Lance deal at this point. I feel like a lot of people, if they're willing to buy Lance, are probably going to be offering like early twos if you're lucky, probably more so like mid twos. And at that point, given your situation, I would probably just see what Trey Lance can give me from a point equity standpoint to potentially sell at a later date. However, again, if you have any offers out there, again, this is from the Trey Lance guy. If you have any offers out there with first round equity, you have to liquidate at this point because I do think the market's pretty much telling you where they want Trey Lance to be.
Yeah, and of course, as a Mother Flocker tier member, you have access to our trade value charts. So as far as JMO's price and Trey Lance's price, check those out. About a mid to late first for either of those guys, and they're off my roster. Same goes for DJ Moore. If I can get a mid to late first for him, he's off my roster. Just given where your team is at, by the time you're ready to compete, DJ Moore will probably be 28, 29 years old. And we don't know how his situation's even going to materialize this year from like a redraft perspective. So I personally would offload some of those riskier assets. And of course, any running backs that have any kind of value during the season, if Penny's getting a big workload, you can offload him. CEH maybe steps into a handcuff type of role or something, I would offload him. Let's break down some of these trades before we go too long on Tano's team here. On May 25th, he said this was 2 deals. So this is the sum of two different trades. He sent away Brandon Ayuk and Elijah Moore for Darnell Mooney, Javonte Williams, Nico Collins, Desmond Ridder, and a 3rd round pick. What are your thoughts on this deal?
It's probably fair from like an overall asset standpoint. The only issue I have is you gave away, in my opinion, unless you consider Javonte over Elijah, sure, that's like a toss-up. In my opinion, you probably gave up the 2 best assets in this deal.
I would prefer Javonte comfortably to Elijah Moore, I think.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
I mean, they're very similar in my viewing point. Like they're probably worth like 8th round type of startup picks, in my opinion.
Well, so, market wise, you could argue that Javonte and Ayuk are actually quite similar in terms of what the market views. And Darnell Mooney and Elijah Moore, honestly, not that far apart on the market. Same goes with Nico Collins, and in a super flex, Desmond Ridder's kind of in that range.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of players that we're not like super high on, but I will say they have some open market liquidity. And that's never a bad thing. I think Desmond Ridder, if he, materializes into like a usable quarterback, it's not all that out of the range of outcomes that the Falcons don't reinvest in quarterback next year. They could go into next year with Desmond Ridder as well. And I think he'll have accumulated a lot of value if that happens.
The problem I have is that it's a start 8 league. Like realistically, like a lot of these guys, Mooney, Collins, like they're going to be your wide receiver 6 and 7 on a good team.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily the highest end assets. I personally would have just preferred to offload Ayuk and Elijah Moore for like a 1st, a 2nd, and Javonte or something, or 1st and 2nd and Ridder if you want to take a shot on him. But overall, pretty decent deal, I suppose. What's up?
Well, I'm just gonna say you mentioned maybe Javonte's held in a higher light, but he was able to flip Javonte later on. Let's just get right to that deal. We'll get to the middle one in a second, but Javonte, obviously, we just talked about you requiring him. Well, you actually used him to upgrade to a starting quarterback, a stud starting quarterback, by the way, with Lamar Jackson. Yeah, if you knew this type of deal would be available to you when you acquired Javonte Williams, I am perfectly fine sending Ayuk and Elijah Moore, because realistically, even if you replace this package as AJ Brown, Brandon Ayuk, and Elijah Moore, it's Lamar Jackson by a country mile.
Yeah, and I mean, you somehow got the 305 back on the deal as well. So yeah, great move there. I think sending away Deontay Johnson for 202 and a 3rd. I think that's about his price. I like Deontay Johnson, but 202 and a 3rd is give or take equivalent value for him. I might have slightly preferred him there, but like I said, it's pretty even. So overall, like we said, risky assets, maybe shop those, see what you can do in terms of acquiring more pick equity. Even if you have to use some of your like mid-round picks to be able to upgrade to 1st, I think it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, your goal with this team should be, you mentioned JMO, you mentioned 103 as assets you're trying to move. You have 3 total first between 24 and 25 right now. If you can jump that puppy up to about 6, you're going to be in a very, very favorable spot, like I mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move on to Zack's team here. Another Mother Flocker tier member, 12-team PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, super flex. Herbert, Carr, Stroud, Ridder at quarterback. Mixon, Sanders, Charbonnet, Kendre Miller, and others at running back. And then Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, Christian Kirk, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Kadarius Toney, Quentin Johnston at wide receiver, Kyle Pitts, Michael Mayer, and Gerald Everett. My favorite tight end core for a rebuilding team is Kyle Pitts, Michael Mayer, by the way, because it's just so classic. You get two guys that have a lot of accumulative value, if that's even a word, but does not have his many of his picks in the future. He does have his late first next year, and then in 2025 he has his first and second, no second or third rounders to speak of, and it looks like he's already had the rookie draft, so 2023 picks not factoring in. He said this is a startup league that he drafted in June of 2023, so a couple months ago. He definitely believes that he has a chance to win it all this year. He has great youth at the core players and also on his bench. He said, I have the luxury of still having his own first-round picks in the future. What moves, if any, do you think I should be making to go for it? I could have a super team if I hold on to Stroud, my young running backs, QJ, and my first if some of them pan out. So what are your thoughts on this team? Do you think he's ready to compete?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the roster right now, your quarterback, obviously Justin Herbert's a hammer. Derek Carr, can't really expect much there. So I'd say you're fine at quarterback with one hammer and one, mid-range type of quarterback 2 option. Running back, you got Mixon, Sanders, Charbonnet, Miller. Couple like solid names where if the wide receivers are strong enough, like they can suffice, but no real hammers at running back. Wide receivers, I feel like you're strong at this position. Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, Christian Kirk, Deebo Samuel, etc. There. Strong there in that tight end. I mean, you got the gold standard himself, and you got another stud option with Michael Mayer. So I'll say from a receiving and tight end standpoint, you're absolutely ready to contend. I will say that your running back should be able to suffice, though I will say as a contending team, I am a little bit worried of my quarterback 2 spot being filled by one of Derek Carr, CJ Stroud, or Desmond Ridder on a weekly basis.
I think depending on the league market, you might be able to convince me that you should turn this into a punt. Just because, I mean, like, I don't believe in the players that you're hitching your wagon to from a redraft standpoint. Like, if I'm being honest, I did the what makes a league winning quarterback video. Derek Carr and CJ Stroud obviously did not grade out very highly there. So you're kind of hamstrung at quarterback too. And Ritter, the same thing. Actually, Ritter graded out better than both of them. So he would actually be closer to QB2 for me this year. Mixon and Sanders, man, like, I don't want to rely on those guys in a competitive window for a running back core. And yeah, it's kind of like a 0 RB, and you got a strong wide receiver core and a strong tight end core. But to be honest, I would want an even stronger wide receiver core to be able to rely on those type of assets. So if I'm being honest, I would see what it would cost you to offload Mixon, offload Sanders, offload Derek Carr, maybe upgrade from Derek Carr using your first to a better quarterback or something, and maybe punt this. Like, I don't know. This is like a rough situation for me because I do think, if you sold your late first in a league market where, first round capital is very highly regarded, you could probably get Josh Jacobs and this thing would be totally fine. But at the same time, if your league market is one that is everybody's trying to compete, then I would suggest that you try and maybe move off of or get younger at some of those other positions there.
Yeah, it's a tricky spot. I will say I would probably just try to contend with this team because I do think that while the running backs don't have the highest ceiling, I feel like they're supplemented at other spots. There is one prime move I'm doing before I'm contending, though, is I'm seeing if a package of CJ Stroud, Desmond Ridder, maybe a first and second can go out and get you like a Deshaun Watson. You need to go buy a quarterback too with this team. If you can buy a Deshaun Watson or maybe a Dak Prescott comes at a cheaper price, maybe it only costs you like CJ Stroud plus Kadarius Toney plus a second to go get Dak Prescott. In your spot, you need a quarterback 2 right now that you can rely upon for consistent quarterback 1 production because you don't have the hammers at running back to be able to deal with mediocrity at the quarterback 2 position.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe in that Dak Prescott deal, you can get him to throw in James Conner or something, somebody that can give you some more running back help there. So, I mean, shaky, but again, given that this league just was drafted in June of 2023, there's probably no monsters in this league. So you should be able to compete if you make a move or 2 here and there. And we kind of have outlined some of those. He also did make some trades here, and he's done a pretty good job, I would say, in most of these. He sold his late first, basically, or projected late first because he's trying to compete for the startup 508 by the looks of it, and he drafted CJ Stroud at that point. So Stroud falling at that point in the draft is definitely good news. Probably bad news in terms of if you tried to sell CJ Stroud because he's probably not very valuable on your market. I would say you just got a good value. Just take the value and hold CJ Stroud. The other trade he made here is just an absolute fleece. This is one of the biggest fleeces I've ever seen in a startup trade. The 9-12. Exactly. It does not make sense. The 9-12 he sold where he drafted Alexander Madison, presumably sniped somebody on Alexander Madison. He got their first which also would have been easily enough, by the way. But then you also got the 902, which
would have
is
easily been
Charbonnet,
enough.
which doesn't make any sense because the 902 Charbonnet is higher pick than the 912 Alexander Madison and the 1302 Michael Mayer. So I don't know if you like mistyped this trade or not, but
I'm
either
hoping you
way,
did.
just literally you like absolutely fleeced this guy.
Yeah, like maybe the 13th was on the other side, or he has Michael Mayer. Like I don't did you buy this guy like a good wedding gift or something? Like why? What's going on here? I'm actually confused, genuinely. Like this,
Yeah, I mean, just
if
take the
this went on,
value, I guess.
if this one, like no offense, but if this happened in my league, like I would have questioned both of you guys for collusion because it is collusion, quite frankly. How does somebody take a pick at 902 and then end up trading a 24 first and the 13th round startup pick to take an inferior player at 912? I don't understand it.
This must have been after the startup. Like, I have no idea how this happened.
Even if it was after the startup, if it was Mayer in the first, it's a smash for the Mayer in the first side.
Maybe
If
it's supposed to be the
Charbonnet,
812, and that's where like he typed it in wrong or something, and not the 912 or the 6. Maybe it's supposed to be the 712 or something. I don't know. Either way, you fleece that guy. Just take the value. Jimmy Garoppolo a second in 24, and then a third in 25. You traded away for Derek Carr and Deebo Samuel. I'd rather have Derek Carr than Jimmy Garoppolo, so I think that's a slight upgrade at quarterback. And then I think that was a good price that you paid basically for Deebo Samuel. So pretty good moves there. I would say it looks like your league does, kind of not value first, certain managers. This guy just giving up a first willy-nilly like that is definitely interesting. I would definitely make another move, though, either to get a quarterback 2, to get another running back to add to this stable, or both, depending on the trade that you can get away with. Maybe you can trade, like Danny said, Derek Carr in a late first and Kadarius Toney gets you Dak Prescott, James Conner, or maybe it doesn't get you quite to Dak Prescott. Maybe it just gets you to Kirk Cousins and James Conner, which I think would still be a decent move there at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, not to mention, you do have some tangible wide receiver assets to be able to move if the package is necessary and the owner wants one. Because while it is a start 10 league where you could start up to 5 wide receivers per week, like you have a legitimate 8 names there that could be relevant on any given week. So I would definitely be willing, if it gets me a quarterback upgrade, to shop one in the package.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Christian Kirk might be worth something. Mike Evans might be worth
Kadarius
something.
Toney.
Somebody, Kadarius Toney might be worth something. So you definitely have some flexibility. We can move on to Jared T's team here, who is a Flocker member. He just finished the startup a few weeks ago. He said he loves his team. Looking at his team, it's a 12-team, half PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, half point tight end premium, super flex league. Watson, Ritter, and Levis. So a little weak at the quarterback 2 spot there, but he has a strong QB1. A lot of 0 RB guys, Mitchell, Chase Brown, Eric Gray, Jerome Ford, all those type of dudes. But he does have Olave, DK Metcalf, Jerry Jeudy, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk. All of those guys, I believe, are in my top 20 Dynasty wide receivers. And then tight end, again, another Kyle Pitts, Michael Mayer core here, with, it looks like, all of his future picks, an additional 2025 first, and an extra early 2024 second as well. So pretty good shell that he has built out here. He said he's obviously still in need of a quarterback too, and that's kind of what the punt is for. He's, not projecting to be competitive until 2025, probably in a house money year in 2024 if things break right for him. He said he was trying to offload some of his older wide receiver production. DK and IU come to mind. What would you try and get for them? And would it be terrible to keep them to weaken my pick? Not sure about it. Wanted your opinion. So Metcalf, absolutely, I'm okay shopping.
Yeah, he's gone.
If you can punt him straight up into Addison plus, or his teammate Jackson Smith and Jigba, or Quentin Johnston plus, or something like that, get younger at that position, offload some production, and offload the risk that, I mean, both of us are lower on DK Metcalf from a redraft standpoint. Offload the risk that he loses value for not being as productive. I think that also definitely makes some sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, like a move that I'm thinking of right now that makes a ton of sense, from shedding some points, but still getting a wide receiver asset with the ceiling that, quite frankly, at this point, DK Metcalf's going to be 26 years old. I do think that this type of move would offer a similar ceiling. I would be looking at maybe Treylon Burks plus. If you can get Treylon Burks plus a first-round pick for DK Metcalf plus, I don't know, insert
one of the early twos.
Well, I was just going to say maybe even Elijah Mitchell, maybe a contender wants to do that. They have Treylon Burks on their team because maybe he slipped in the startup, and they're willing to give Treylon Burks in their first for Elijah Mitchell and DK Metcalf. You, A, shed DK Metcalf's advantage over Treylon Burks this year, and B, like Elijah Mitchell's going to be a factor in the fantasy football season this year, whether it's Christian McCaffrey missing time, whether it's, Elijah Mitchell filling in as the RB2 there. He's a talented enough player, and the Shanahan offense, the 49ers have shown that they trust Elijah Mitchell enough to at least give him a sustained workload this year. So just getting his point production off your team too is an added benefit.
Yeah, I mean, your goal here is you're trying to secure your quarterback too with your first round pick next year, right? Like that's what your goal is. You want Caleb Williams or Drake May. As it currently stands, I would imagine somebody's going to be worse than you, and Caleb Williams might be out of the question. So Drake May is probably your best bet in terms of the quarterback two that you're able to acquire. So yeah, I mean, it probably would benefit you to take, a random 2024 first straight up for DK Metcalf, because yeah, you might be, selling for 90 cents on the dollar, but it would offload some point production for you. And any kind of moves that I can make in season to offload point production, get a little bit younger, maybe buy on injured players who aren't going to score points for your team. I would definitely be looking to make moves like that just to make sure that I do secure, Drake May to go along with my Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, and Desmond Ridder. And who knows, maybe Will Levis develops into your QB2, but I would rather, not bank on him and have that be like a happy accident than actually bank on that happening.
Yeah, well, like that's why I mentioned like a deal, like if you can get like a still an upside piece back, like Traylon Burks plus a first for DK plus Elijah Mitchell. Again, like I think that would be the most ideal type of deal. And then aside from that, because I do think Elijah Mitchell and DK Metcalf are the biggest glaring guys I want to get off my team if I'm trying to rip point production. I would say like you mentioned the name Brandon Ayuk. If somebody's willing to pay you realistically, because we're ahead of him on in terms of the market, if they're willing to pay you above market value on Brandon Ayuk, I'd be willing to do that. Like if any package is out there where you can potentially transition Brandon Ayuk into a future first, even if you have to add a piece, I'd be willing to do that. So for example, like you just mentioned, if Brandon Ayuk plus one of those seconds that you have gets you a middle projected 2024 first, I'm signing the papers and I'm sending him over.
Yeah, I mean you're probably selling a little bit low on them, but like we said, we're kind of trying to tank our own pick here, and that would kind of accomplish that, and then also you'd get another mid first to potentially just replace him with Malik Neighbors or Mika Ibuka or something like that in the draft. So yeah, I mean you got a good shell built. You're clearly in the first year of a rebuild, a 1-year punt. Hopefully after you spend your picks next year, you can be in kind of like a house money situation. But you definitely still have some work to do. So let's move on to Tyler W's team, another Flocker member here, a 10-team PPR Superflex League. So a 10-teamer, not a 12-teamer. Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson as his main quarterbacks, Javonte Williams as his main running back, and then some handcuffs and upside swings behind him. Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney, etc. there at wide receiver, and then David Njoku and Dalton Kincaid at tight end. So also has an extra first next year and just an extra first next year, and then all of his future picks. So he's projecting his team to probably be like an early kind of pick by the looks of where he has his stuff labeled there, which is definitely interesting. The league manager apparently smoked all the noobs in the startup, and his team is absolutely stacked. It happens. He said he's far away from competing, especially knowing that this guy's got a super team. So he said he's banking on landing some studs in 2024. He said he believes he can land another early to mid first by trading away Kincaid, Godwin, or one of his handcuff running backs who hits. So that's good to know. I mean, people are reactive maybe in this league, and you can get a first mid-season. He said he desperately needs advice on the Mahomes trade. So we'll talk about that in a second. He said he thinks it's fair value, but I also feel somewhat content with the 2 picks I have going into 2024, because he said he's confident he can out-tank for Caleb Williams. So let's talk about this Mahomes trade here. He has in his inbox right now, he has Mahomes on his team. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the world, the best player in the world, and he's being offered a potentially early first, and he said it's pretty much guaranteed to be the 102, the first that he's being offered. And he's being offered a late first in 2025, Jahan Dotson, Traylon Burks, Ryan Tannehill, and a mid-projected second. So I'm pretty sure I know where you stand on this. What are your thoughts on this trade?
General rule of thumb, if I'm moving a guy like Patrick Mahomes, I need a Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence plus quarterback back. That is my rule. Like if I am moving one of those guys, unless the guy's offering me eight ones, which won't happen, I need at least a tier 2 or 3 quarterback to be satisfied with the move. I think the lowest I would probably go it would be Deshaun Watson, and I would still probably need 2+1s attached to that to even feel satisfied. So although it looks solid, it could be like the 102, but what if that's the 104? I hate projecting early picks right now because it's like there's a big difference right now projecting next year's 102 versus even that falls to the mid range, and that's the 105, 106. And you're looking at the package and saying, I doubt Patrick Mahomes for that. You need to feel perfect about the deal if you're dealing Patrick Mahomes. And again, the only way that would even feel comfortable would be if a Trevor Lawrence is coming back in the package, Justin Herbert's coming back in the package, and at the lowest case scenario, Deshaun Watson's coming back in the package. So for me personally, I think you've built enough value on the team. You can gather enough picks given some of your running backs and wide receivers. And again, you mentioned the name Dalton Kincaid. You can get picks with those guys. You're not getting picks with Patrick Mahomes because you're building around Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'd probably be wise to hold Patrick Mahomes in this case, unless this guy shaved off Ryan Tannehill in a second for like another first. Maybe then it gets a little bit closer, because then we're talking about like Drake May, Marvin Harrison at best case scenario plus. But like, to Danny's point, you don't want to feel iffy about a Patrick Mahomes trade. You want to feel great about a Patrick Mahomes trade, knowing that you sold the best quarterback in the world, potentially one of the best quarterbacks to ever play, for something that is, a bunch of random, guesses. You want to sell them for proven studs. And at least I would much rather get a deal done for Patrick Mahomes that is a 1 for 2 of 2 proven studs for Patrick Mahomes than I would 1 for 5 random lottery tickets like you have here.
I would like to move a guy like Patrick Mahomes. Call me crazy, but I would probably need like Deshaun Watson and Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, like it's gotta be
value.
2 proven studs that are young and you can build around. Like it can't be like, oh, he's giving me Justin Fields and T. Higgins. It's like I probably still wouldn't do that for Patrick Mahomes. As good as those 2 guys are, you're not giving up Patrick Mahomes for anything less than an overpay. And this, in my opinion, is probably closer to like market value than it is an overpay. And even still, it might not be quite the market value.
Yeah, no, because I mean, if we're equating it like, what this is at most 2025 first plus dots, and probably gets you a mid-range type of first, give or take.
Yeah, so I mean, this is probably a 4 first package, and you need 5 at least for Mahomes. That's basically the way I look at this.
And you're struggling to get to 4 first, is what I'm saying. Like it's at max a 4 first value.
Yeah, yeah. So he also sold a few weeks ago. He sold Ramondre Stevenson for a mid to early first. That's a great move.
Smash.
Obviously, you just replace him potentially with better Ramondre Stevenson and Raheem Sanders in next year's class. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely stick to your script here. You said I think I can land another mid to early first by trading Kincaid, Godwin, one of his handcuff running backs who hits. That tells me that this league market is not the type of league market that values picks highly, and you can offload productive players, assuming they're producing, for a good amount of value. So I would definitely say anybody who's overperforming, anybody who's, giving you great production, you're trying to tank for Caleb Williams, you're trying to get, these guys off of your roster for high value assets, I would definitely take advantage of that. He said trading Godwin for a first would likely lock in the 101 for him in 2024. So it looks like everybody in this league, minus him, is trying to build out a competitive roster.
Yeah, well, I will quickly add, he also mentions the guy who's offering for Mahomes is a guy who has Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey.
So that 25 first is 112, most likely. Yeah.
Correct. And I was going to say, like, if he really wants Patrick Mahomes, he's going to give that high-end projected first round plus Lamar Jackson before, like, that's where the talks begin. If you really want to tear down Mahomes and you want an extra pick, it's Lamar Jackson, and it's that second projected 2024 first. That's the package.
Right. There's a good chance that this guy's at a point in time where he has a lot of assets, he has a lot of players, he has the ability maybe to even overpay for Patrick Mahomes, and you need him to overpay for Patrick Mahomes to move off of him. He needs to send you Jamar Chase, the early projected first and the late first. Like he needs to give you all that shit for Mahomes.
Or I was just gonna say Lamar plus that first. I think would be like perfect, because you supplement your points and he gets his quarterback upgrade. Because realistically, it looks like
there's a good chance he wants a quarterback opposite Lamar, though, is the reason he's trying to trade for Mahomes. So he probably won't do that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So yeah, Jamar plus 102 plus a future first if you're making the move. But I'm content just waiting and see who wants to offer the best package. Because realistically, Patrick Mahomes' market value ain't going down anytime soon.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that nobody can offer something better than this guy, and you just don't trade Patrick Mahomes, which is also a very viable solution to this problem. You just don't trade him. So we can move on to the next team, which is from Mason here. It is a team from late April. We never got to it, so we're covering it now. 10-team PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, is a single quarterback league. Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, and Trey Lance is the main QBs there. Bijan, Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, Kendre Miller, Roshan Johnson, Damian Harris, Tyler Algier, very strong at running back. Chase, Olave, Burks, Jamison Williams, Pickens, Jaden Reed, and some others at wide receiver. Greg Dulcich, Cole Kmet, and Irv Smith has all of his future picks. So he said Doesn't want to push his chips in too early. He says Diggs' owner is trying to tank for Marvin Harrison Jr. It's a 1-quarterback league, so obviously he is the 101. He said he has an offer sitting to trade away Jameson Williams and receive Calvin Ridley. I'm smashing that 100%.
Yeah,
so to your point here, is this pushing your chips in too early? I don't think so. This team can win.
Oh, absolutely, it can win. I mean, if I'm looking at it, your main weakness would be sustained production at the wide receiver position.
Maybe tight end too.
Well, I was going to say outside of the top two, but when you're trading Jameson Williams for a guy that we're both going to have as a fringe wide receiver one, I believe he's our wide receiver 13 between us and Calvin Ridley going into the 2023 season. Yeah, you just bought your point production for Jameson Williams, who your prank can give you probably half of Calvin Ridley's seasonal point production. So absolutely fine move there. Love that trade. Not to mention, yeah, like you said, you're strong at running back. Your quarterbacks are more than fine. Tight end is a little bit iffy, but Cole Kmet plus a 2 gets you Pat Freiermuth in season most likely.
Yeah, I would say this is a team that and I'm glad you have the attitude. I would rather, you guys listening to this have the attitude that you don't want to push in your chips too early versus pushing your chips in too early. But I will say this is the type of team I'm pushing my chips in with, because you have studs at every position. You got a stud quarterback who I really believe in from a redraft perspective. You have stud running backs. You have 2 stud receivers and a bunch of good upside pieces. And you have a pretty solid upside group of tight end. And you still have all your picks to buy players if you needed to. So, I mean, if Greg Dulcich in your first next year gets you Kyle Pitts, which it might because Kyle Pitts is extremely undervalued, I would make moves like that. If Jameson Williams for Calvin Ridley, I'm accepting that deal yesterday. Like I would rather have Calvin Ridley in Dynasty than Jameson Williams, let alone in redraft when you're, in a redraft kind of frame of mind, especially in a start 8 league. You need the best 2 wide receivers out there, the best flex options out there. You need the best running backs out there. And your starting lineup is going to be Trevor Lawrence, Bijan Robinson, Kenneth Walker, Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Calvin Ridley in one of your flexes, probably J.K. Dobbins or Traylon Burks in the other flex, and Greg Dulcich as your main tight end. You can win with this team.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. You can definitely win with this team. Do you want to go through some of these deals?
Yeah, let's go through some of these trades. So on April 10th, it looks like, so before the NFL draft, he sold the 103. Again, remember, this is a 1-quarterback 103. So he basically sold Jackson Smith and Jigba straight up for Devontae Smith. I have Devontae Smith slightly higher in my rankings, so I like the move.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely not bad, especially if you're trying to compete. I am a little curious because, right. Okay, so the April 10th move happens. 103 gets sent for Devontae Smith. You then use Devontae Smith in a leverage package on June 17th to be able to tier up to Jamar Chase and Chris Olave. Let's just break down this deal real quick. Breece Hall, Drake London, Michael Pittman, and Devontae Smith gets you to Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, and Tyler Algier. For simplicity's sake, I prefer Olave, but let's just say Drake London plus Pittman equals Olave plus Algier, give or take. Or for ease sake, let's just say Drake London equals Olave.
Yeah, I would say London versus Olave is fair.
And then at that point, you got Jamar Chase for, as much as I love Breece Hall plus Michael Pittman plus Devontae Smith gets you Jamar Chase and Tyler Algier. Give me the hammers, man. Unless this is a start 12, start 13 league or whatever, you need deep starting lineups. In a start 8, man, I'm taking fucking Jamar Chase and I'm taking his potential 23 points per game that he could offer this year. I
agree with you, but I do think you gave up a lot here. I won't sugarcoat it. I think you gave up quite a bit of good assets here. And Breece Hall and Drake London, like those guys are very stable dynasty assets. Devontae Smith, also a very stable producer. If this deal was Breece Hall, Drake London, and Michael Pittman for Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Tyler Algier, and maybe you had to throw a second instead of Devontae Smith, I would like it a little bit more. I think you paid like 110 cents on the dollar. But I will say Jamar Chase will probably make you look smart for this deal. So, I mean, at least when you're doing this, you're getting a superstar in a shallow league starting lineup. And Jamar Chase in a 1-quarterback league is presumably the first or second pick off the board.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Relatively, you're looking at it, it's a 1-quarterback league. It's only a start 8. Like, if I have to overpay for some hammers in that league and have to deal with some depth at some point in the season and use, my first, second, or third to be able to add in season, I'm more willing to do that. I just want the players that can win me a championship. And Breece Hall, as much as I love him, like for this year, points per game wise, once he's fully healthy, he still has an unclear standing as to where exactly he's going to start producing at that level. Is it going to be week 3? Is it going to be week 5? we don't know. And again, I love him at cost as an early third round redraft pick, but at the same time, I love Jamar Chase as the 102 off the board behind Justin Jefferson. So from a pure point scoring projection standpoint, Jamar Chase projects to be one of those players that can win you a league. And in a start 8, I just want players that can win me the league.
Yeah, absolutely. So going forward, I would potentially shop some of your younger wide receivers for guys that are more productive. Yeah. Burks, JMO, George Pickens. Those guys, I like them. They're solid. They're good upside pieces. If you gave me, like I said, Ridley for Jameson Williams right now, I'm taking that. If you can give me Jerry Jeudy for Treylon Burks right now, I'm taking that. If you can give me George Pickens, swap out him for Chris Godwin or Marquise Brown, I'm probably taking that because I want the production on my team, because this team is ready to win. You can, transition this into like a 3 to 4 year window. As long as Bijan is on his rookie contract, is as long as your winning window is. Same with Kenneth Walker as well. So you can definitely make some moves to upgrade at tight end, maybe upgrade as depth wide receivers for your contending roster. But I think we can move on to the next team here, which is from Allison. Had a startup draft a couple months ago, tried to build a rebuild / productive struggle since Kyler fell at the 210. So looking at this team, 12 team PPR, 1.75 tight end premium. I'm assuming that means it's just like 1.75 points to the tight end, not the premium of 1.75. And it is a super flex league. Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, and others at quarterback. Not much going on at running back, James Cook, CEH, and others there. But Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Deontay Johnson, Michael Gallup, Jacoby Myers, Darnell Mooney, Tyler Boyd, a lot of guys there at wide receiver. And then McBride, Jelani Woods, Taysom Hill at tight end. Also has an extra second next year, an extra first in 2025 as well. So there's one team that has 7 2024 firsts, apparently. So obviously, Allison says they beat me. Like they did a great job of collecting firsts in the startup draft. And he or she says, I'm shooting for the 2024-2025 season to compete potentially. Thoughts on who to try and sell to accumulate more draft capital, or kind of just help with the rebuild in general. So for me, it's very clearly you have the shell built out. You have your quarterbacks and your wide receivers. You need running backs and tight ends. Do you have the assets to actually acquire those players, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the perks of this format in particular is running backs don't matter at all. It's a one running back start league with a full PPR where you can start up to 4 wide receivers a week. Quite literally,
you can start up to 6 wide receivers. There's it's 4 flexes.
Oh, too. 4 flex. You can start up to 6 wide receivers a week. God damn, I ain't paying any attention to a running back. You want to send a second, once you're ready to compete, you want to send a second in season for a guy like James Conner and just ride him into the sunset as your hammer running back in a 1 running back start league. Go ahead, because ultimately here you built up sustainable wide receiver depth. Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Deontay Johnson, Darnell Mooney, Michael Gallup, Jacoby Myers, etc. There. You are loaded there. You have a potential advantage at quarterback as soon as Kyler Murray comes back, whether that's week 1, whether that's week 5, whenever he's fully healthy from that knee injury suffered last year. You're going to have a big advantage at quarterback with him and Joe Burrow. Like you kind of mentioned, you do need a running back, but good thing for you, running back should not be highly valued commodities in this league. So running back should be able to supplement when you're ready to win. Tight end's the only kind of what am I going to do there? But Trey McBride has the opportunity to develop in his second year as a tight end, and not to mention, worst case scenario, you have to throw someone out there. Taysom Hill could do worse.
Yeah, I mean, if your first is high in a 1.75 tight end premium, maybe if you have a mid first next year because your team overperforms, Brock Bowers would be worth that pick.
Yeah,
100%. Maybe you could even go buy low on like a Michael Mayer or something right now with one of your second rounders. Like those second rounders in a 1 running back start league, you're probably going to get one of the best running backs in next year's class with one of those second rounders, because everybody's going to be obsessed with wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks.
Question I have is what is Bijan worth in this type of league format?
I honestly think he should be worth more in this type of format because
he's
the ultimate hammer. Like he's the only running back you need.
So right, that's actually fair, right? So the hammers are going to be worth a lot, but okay, never mind Bijan. What's I don't know, Rashad White going to be worth in this league?
Nothing,
like a late second?
I would take a second rounder for him, 100%.
I think it'd probably take a late second given the format. Yeah. Fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, your goal is by 2025, you have your roster built out, and you have 2 2025 firsts, you have a 2024 first, you have some seconds. Maybe you'll be able to come out of next year's draft with, a hammer running back, Jatavion Sanders, and an upside wide receiver or something like that. And then in 2025, after your house money year in 2024, you can kind of totally build this thing out. They do have some trades listed here. So on May 21st, sent away Chris Godwin, Josh Jacobs, and Hassan Haskins, and received Garrett Wilson. In this format where you could start up to 6 wide receivers, Garrett Wilson should cost an arm and a leg, and you absolutely did not pay an arm and a leg for Garrett Wilson. May 27th, Darren Waller was sent away for a mid-second and a mid-fourth. You may have been able to get a little bit more in a 1.75 tight end premium for Darren Waller. I will say I probably would have held until the season and maybe see if he's back healthy and back on his feet, and you could maybe have sold for a first rounder for Darren Waller, or maybe close to it. A Waller in a second or Waller in a piece gets you at 1.
It'd be tricky because I'm just trying to think about it from a contender standpoint. Even if you have your late first of buying power, I really strongly doubt that somebody's going to be using that buying power on Darren Waller. So I don't really think this is egregious because maybe, like you said, you probably could have gotten like an early second in season from a team, but mid-second and fourth, maybe if this was
it's
like
also possible he's worth nothing in season if he gets hurt again. So
well, that's the thing, right? So maybe like you might have wanted like a mid-second and a third given the point production he could potentially bring, but I honestly don't think this is a bad deal.
Yeah, for sure. So not a bad move there. And then Cooper Kupp sent away for Jacoby Myers, a mid to late first in 2025, mid to late first or second, in 2025 as well. This one I definitely would have waited until in season. I think Cooper Kupp. I'm less concerned that he's going to get injured in season than I am with Darren Waller. I probably would have waited to sell Cooper Kupp if I'm being honest, but I mean, getting a mid to late first and a mid to late second is not a terrible return. Jacoby Myers is a decent depth piece, especially in a format like this. Jacoby Myers actually has a decent amount of value as like a PPR flex option that you can use. So not a bad trade there. I might have waited a little bit to see if I could get better value for those guys, but overall, I think you're doing a pretty good job. You definitely have some work to do in the rookie drafts coming up, but by 2025, I think you can turn this thing into a contender. So let's get to Brandon's team here, which will be the last one of the video. We initially we're going to do 8, but we went a little bit longer here, so we're just going to do 7 today. Brandon has his team a 12-team PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, non-super flex, so 1 quarterback league. Joe Burrow, Jimmy Garoppolo, it's pretty much all you need there. McCaffrey, Gibson, Fournette, Roshan Johnson, a couple other guys there. Charbonnet buried all the way down at the bottom. DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Jordan Addison, and then some other guys there. And then at tight end, Dallas Goedert is the main guy, plus Michael Mayer as reserve depth there. So rookie draft already happened, so ignore those 2023 first. 2024 and 2025 has all of the picks. He said this is his first year playing Dynasty, and he said he's trying to find the best way to build his team from here. He said he doesn't really have a set strategy at this point in time, which usually is not the worst thing in the world. You can, remain flexible that way, but you should probably by the time you get midway through the rookie draft or the startup draft have a set strategy. And he said he was kind of all over the place. He said after watching our video on house money, he's thinking kind of maybe he's in the house money contender side of things. What do you think? So if you're a house money team, the definition of that is that you could lose this year and it doesn't matter. And having Christian McCaffrey on your team means that you cannot lose this year. You need to win if you have Christian McCaffrey on your team.
Yeah. If you truly want to get to house money status, there's 4 names that are instantly going to be sellable options for me. Because I would say names like, go sell Leonard Fournette. Who the fuck's buying Leonard Fournette right now? Go sell Kareem Hunt. Who the fuck's buying Kareem Hunt right now? Nobody's buying those old farts at this point. So realistically, they're not even worth a mention for being able to sell. Like obviously, if you can get any type of value for those guys, package them together and get a late projected third, you go and do it. But let's talk about reasonable options that should be able to net you something. If you want to enter your house money, I love Christian McCaffrey, what he could do for you in season. He's not going to be on your team. You're going to be able to sell him. The other ones are going to be a little bit, hot takey, but the market ceiling of DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, and Chris Godwin for a house money contender just simply isn't worth it because those guys are tied. Their value is tied right now as mid-20-something players, 25 to 27-year-old players. Their production value is what you're looking for. And quite frankly, they project pretty fine as, wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 types. But if I can downgrade, quote-unquote, get younger and maybe get a pick attached. So, for example, if DK Metcalf can get you Jordan Addison plus a 1 for DK Metcalf plus a 2, you're sending that deal in tomorrow.
I mean, you have Addison on his roster already, but
Quentin Johnson. Then,
yeah,
sorry.
Quentin Johnson, same thing. Yeah, I would say those guys are probably options I'm looking to sell because unfortunately, you're not really in a position where you could compete. I think. I mean, Burrow, if you look at the starting roster, like
Quarterback
Burrow,
afterwards.
McCaffrey, one of those like 0 RB guys in the RB2 slot, then Metcalf, DJ Moore, Godwin, like Addison works in. I just think you're lacking a little bit of depth on this roster.
Yeah.
So I would probably be proactive and sell the players that have value, especially. I mean, you said you're a first-time Dynasty player. I don't know if everybody is, but if everybody's a first-time Dynasty player, I would encourage this even more so, because that means they're going to really highly value Christian McCaffrey. They're going to really highly value DK Metcalf and those type of guys. So if everybody's a first-time Dynasty player in this league, definitely try and punt this thing and go watch. I mean, he said he hasn't watched the rebuilding strategy or the contending strategy. I would go watch the rebuilding strategy if everybody's a first-time Dynasty player or new to Dynasty.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. By the way, I initially thought, oh my God, the quarterback situation, I thought it was a super flex, but it's a one quarterback league, so you are fine there. But like Corey said, just clean up your flexes, because I do think that you can extract some value there, get some liquidity added to your team, because for your situation being house money, typically on a house money, I want at least multiple picks in the upcoming draft class. So if you can,
young players that aren't
Yeah.
going to age, which
100%.
obviously we've already kind of outlined.
So yeah, like process moves, like we mentioned, Metcalf plus a 2. You can go out and buy like Quentin Johnson plus a 1. That's a move that I'd be willing to do. DJ Moore, if you could trade off DJ Moore into
Any first.
or better yet, I think you might be able to get Jahan Dotson for him right now, and I think that would be a very, very good transition for you right now. But like Corey said, if you can get any type of first, that's also going to help you accomplish your goal. And same thing with Chris Godwin. I feel like you might have to wait in season, because there's a lot of pessimism around Chris Godwin right now. People don't know what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback situation is going to be, volume. They don't know how he's going to be after the injury. But if he goes, by week 4 and he's looking like prime old Chris Godwin, who is averaging 18 PPR points per game to start the year, and you can potentially flip him at some point, even if you had to add a piece for first round liquidity, that should be your goal.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if that happens, considering Tom Brady is the NFL record holder, number 1 and 2 spot for pass attempts per game. Did you know that?
Nuts, yeah.
Pass attempts per game in a season, Tom Brady in 2022 and in 2021 is both NFL records. So I'd be really, really shocked if Chris Godwin was anything better than like a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 this year. But at the same time, that still might have a lot of value in a league where everybody's new to Dynasty, and they'd be willing to give up a potential mid to late first for that. So definitely gauge your league market, and maybe go watch that video as well that we talked about evaluating your league market. Write down what you know, especially if you're a new Dynasty player. That's a perfect exercise for you to be able to get in the mindset of Dynasty versus redraft, which is probably the mindset that you've been in for multiple years before trying a Dynasty league. So if you guys made it to the end of this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you want to be a part of Dynasty Decisions episodes and you want to have your team broken down, like we said at the beginning of the video, our Mother Flocker and Flocker tier subscription site subscribers on Flock Fantasy using the promo code FSE will have the ability to skip the line, and we'll break down your team ASAP. Probably we run these videos like once a week, once every week and a half, once every 2 weeks or so, and you'll get your team broken down very quickly. So definitely subscribe over there. And if you sign up annually, not only will you have the ability to get your teams broken down on Dynasty Decisions, you'll also get one free Zoom consultation with myself, with Danny, whichever one of us you prefer. So definitely check that out. Flockfantasy.com/FSE, link down below in the description. And also be sure to check out all of our sponsors down there if you want to support the show as well. So with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.